Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a new lecture in your course, Beginning Jenkins by Eduonix. My name is Ahmed and this is section 2 of our class. In this section we are going to actually get our hands dirty because in the previous section we spent all the time explaining continuous integration, explaining DevOps and the different methodologies that are used for software development. And I hope you had a good idea about the role of Jenkins as a continuous integration and as a DevOps tool. In this section, we're going to start installing Jenkins, so let's get started. So, again, what is Jenkins? To refresh your mind, it's a continuous integration, continuous delivery, continuous testing, and continuous deployment open source tool. It is written in Java, and because of that, Java is the only requirement. And if you have installed software before, you may be glad to know that Jenkins does not have any other prerequisites other than Java. If you have Java installed, you can install Jenkins. And actually, it supports a large number of plugins. This makes it highly customizable, as we're going to see later in this class. Jenkins has several options when it comes to installation and deployment. It can work as a standalone application using its own web server. It can also run inside an Apache web server or a Tomcat web server or as a servlet in an application server like, for example, WebSphere, WebLogic, JBoss, and other application servers. Since the only prerequisite for Jenkins, as we said, is a Java installation, and at the time of this writing, Java 7 is the version required to install Jenkins. You have to have at least Java 7 or higher to install Jenkins. And since Java is by definition and by default is a cross-platform software, so you have a large number of options when choosing how to host a Jenkins server, as we're going to have a look later in this section. So it can be installed on a Unix, Linux machine, Mac OS X, Windows, or even a Docker container. In this section, we are going to examine how to install it on Ubuntu Linux, on a Docker container, and using the standalone version, as well as inside a container. Throughout this section, you're going to see me use a software that's called Vagrant. Lots of people are already familiar with Vagrant. However, some other people may not know what Vagrant is, so let's have this quick discussion about Vagrant. Vagrant is one of the DevOps toolset. It is used for rapidly provisioning an operating system, optionally shipping with pre-installed software like web server or an application framework or so on. Vagrant gives you a ready-made, already installed operating system. If you compare it to another virtualization platform, however, Vagrant is not a virtualization platform. However, if you try to compare it to a virtualization platform like VMware or VirtualBox, you're going to see that it's totally different than them. In VirtualBox, for example, if you want to install an Ubuntu or a CentOS operating system or even a Windows operating system, you will have to grab the CD-ROM, the ISO that is used for the installation, put it in the virtual machine settings, start the machine and start the installation. And then after the installation is finished, you will have to configure your installation, adding users, adding software or removing software, and so on and so forth. And only when all this is finished, do you have a complete installation, do you have a running version of your operating system with the frameworks or with the prerequisites that you need to start working. Whether you're a developer or a system administrator or any other role, you'll have to pass through those steps before you can work. However, with Vagrant, all this has been summarized, all this has been cut short by giving you a completely running operating system. When you run a Vagrant machine, you already have a running operating system that does not need an installation, it does not need a configuration. Of course, you can further configure it, and Vagrant actually is very, very flexible when configuring its machines. However, out of the box, you will have an already running machine, optionally with your software pre-installed. So for example, I can have a Vagrant machine that has Apache web server already installed. I can have a Vagrant machine that already has Laravel framework, which is a famous PHP framework. For those of you who know about PHP or develop PHP applications, Laravel is a very well-known framework. Some Vagrant boxes come pre-shipped with Laravel or Tomcat, as we're going to see in this section. We're going to have a Vagrant machine that already has the Tomcat application server installed and configured. We don't have to pass through all the steps of getting an Ubuntu ISO image, installing Ubuntu, creating the necessary users, configuring the network, configuring the users and groups that are going to be used to install Tomcat, and then actually grabbing a version of Tomcat from the website, downloading it and start installing it and passing through all the hassle of setting it up, although it's rather easy to install Tomcat. But if you do have a tool that already can do this for us, why not use it? And as we have mentioned before several times, this is the essence of DevOps. Whenever you can automate something, automate it. So In this class, we are also using VirtualBox, and Vagrant cannot be run by its own. It has to rely on a virtualization platform. So if you want to run Vagrant, you will have to install either VirtualBox or VMware. If you want to install VirtualBox, just go ahead to this URL, virtualbox.org. Okay, as you can see here, the page is loading, and you're gonna see that VirtualBox is supported on all major operating systems. Windows hosts, OS X hosts for Mac, Linux distribution, and even Solaris is supported by VirtualBox. So you grab your copy, start your installation. It's very easy. It's just a wizard that gives you some options. You click next till the end, and everything is just running. It does not need any special configuration. It does not need any complex options. It just works. The second thing that we need is Vagrant itself. If you want to install Vagrant, you will download your copy from this website, vagrantapp.com/downloads.html. Let's have a look quickly at this website, and you're gonna find that Vagrant also supports a lot of operating systems. So we have Debian, we have Windows, we have CentOS, we have Mac OS X. As you can see here, there is a lot of options when it comes to installation. And again, Vagrant installation is as easy as running the wizard. It does not have any difficulties while installation. Once you have Vagrant installed, all what you have to do is run Vagrant on your terminal like this, Vagrant version, and this will give you the latest version of Vagrant, or the version that is installed. At the time of this recording, I have version 1.9.5, while my latest version is 1.9.7. I can upgrade my version, however, this version is fine for our lab. It won't cause any difficulties. Now, the next question that we need to ask is where Jenkins stands. And when we say where Jenkins stands, we are talking about the market. We are talking about the other CI tools, because Jenkins is not the only CI tool in the market. However, it stands out due to its competitive features, among which that it's free. Jenkins is an open source project, so you don't have to pay for using Jenkins. Of course, subject to the license, you don't have to pay for using Jenkins. It has a large support base, and as you will see when you start working with Jenkins, almost any problem that you face will have faced somebody else, and an answer will be posted on some blog or forum. It's have a large community support. And it is highly customizable through a large set of plugins that cover virtually anything you need Jenkins to do. It can also be integrated with cloud providers out of the box like Amazon AWS. This makes room for even more flexibility and automation. And finally, it is also very flexible when it comes to installation options, as you're going to see in this section. After all, it only needs Java as a prerequisite, hence it can be installed on nearly all Java application servers or containers like Tomcat, WebSphere, JBoss, WebLogic, among others. Now, in the coming lecture, we are going to start the first lab in our section, which is installing Tomcat. And for Tomcat installation, we are going to use a Vagrant box, as we have just mentioned. So until next lecture, see you next. Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Ahmed again for Eduonix, and this is Beginning Jenkins, Section 2, Jenkins Installation. In the previous lecture, we have seen how we can install Jenkins on a myriad of options, on a myriad of hosts and platforms. Let's start by our first option here, or one of our options, which is installing Jenkins as a servlet or inside a Java container, as it is sometimes called. Sometimes it's also called an application server, and for this lab we have chosen Tomcat as our application server because it's lightweight compared to other fully fledged application servers like WebSphere or WebLogic. They're going to take a lot of time to install and configure. We just want to demonstrate Jenkins and not the application server itself, so we have chosen Tomcat for those purposes. Again, Jenkins needs Java version 7 for the minimum and Tomcat version 5 for the minimum. I could have gone through the steps of deploying Java 8 and downloading and installing Tomcat. However, Vagrant has a box that has those components already installed. It can be used for our Jenkins installation. So let's have a look at our example system. This is my terminal, this is my Mac, and I have already, as you can see here, I have already installed Vagrant on this machine. So I can use it to create my machine that is going to be used for Jenkins. So in your home directory, or in whatever path you desire, in my case, I'm going to use the home directory. I'm going to create a new directory. I'm going to call it Tomcat. And Vagrant actually works on a per directory basis. This means that if I am inside this directory, then the Vagrant command I'm going to use is going to manage all the machines that are running inside this directory. Once I am outside this directory, I cannot use Vagrant to manage the machines that are inside this directory. I have to be inside the directory to manage the machines that are installed or that are running there. Okay, so I'm gonna create a directory for Tomcat because I'm going to host a machine that has Tomcat pre-installed on this directory. So I want to have a friendly name or a descriptive name. The second step is to run Vagrant init. And Vagrant init is a command that will create something called a Vagrant file. A Vagrant file is nothing more than a text file. I'm going to show it to you in a moment. This text file contains all the instructions that Vagrant needs to start the machine. It contains instructions like, for example, the network cards. If you want to forward some ports, we're going to come to this in a moment. If you want to have another user than the default user, which is Vagrant. If you want to change the memory or the CPU that is used in the machine, in addition to other options, even if you want to configure the machine automatically through a configuration management system like Ansible or Chef or Puppet or Salt or even Docker, you can do that using the Vagrant file. So the Vagrant init command is used to create this file, and I need to, and I can optionally pass in the name of the machine that I want to use, or in our case, the name of the box that I want to use, and it's called eMasiha. It has a strange name, but it is the one that contains the Tomcat installation /Ubuntu 64-Java, and I can optionally pass in the box version 1.0.0. Once I click enter, as you can see here, it's informing me that I have a Vagrant file created in my directory. If I go inside a directory and vim this Vagrant file, I can see that it contains a lot of options. They are all well commented, they are all well explained. As you can see here, one of the most important options here that I can configure or that I can play with is the config.vm.network, this one. Because this one is the option or the configuration that forwards ports from the machine, the guest machine, to the host machine. The Vagrant machine here is called guest, while the my machine, my local machine, is called the host, because it is hosting this guest, it is hosting this machine on its kernel or on its system. Okay, so if you want to access any port inside the guest machine, you cannot, because by default it uses something that is called NATing. NAT is short for Network Address Translation. It is a way of protecting the network ports that are running inside the guest by preventing any external access to those ports, except if you want to explicitly allow this access by forwarding the port internally to the host. In other words, if I'm running a web server inside the guest machine and this web server is running, of course, by default on port 80, if I want to access this port from outside the Vagrant host, from the Vagrant guest, I will have to use port 8080 on the local host. So if I want to access this website, I will have to go to my browser and navigate to localhost or 127.0.0.1, which is the address of the local host, as you already know, colon 8080. And Vagrant is going to translate or to forward any traffic that is coming to port 8080 to the guest on port 80, and the other way around, any traffic that is coming from this guest to the source of the traffic or to the user or to the client that is requesting the page, it is going to be forwarded in the same channel to the requesting host. So why this is important? Because we are going to actually forward the traffic that is coming to port 8080 on our guest, because port 8080 is the default port that Jenkins runs on, or the Tomcat runs on, because Tomcat as well runs on 8080. Both of them actually run on 8080. Whether Jenkins is running as a standalone application or inside Tomcat, both of them use the 8080 port. So I'm going to forward traffic that is coming at port 8080 on the host to the same port, but on the guest. Why? Because the guest will be running Jenkins or Tomcat on port 8080, and I want the user to enter the same port when he or she accesses this application via localhost. I don't want to change the port. I want it to be 8080 as well, and that is possible. I can forward the port to the same port, or I can forward it to a different port. It's up to me, so I'm going to leave it like this, 8080. And then the next step is, of course, if you want to have any other configuration, you are free to do so. You can, as you can see here, change the memory. You can even run a shell script that gets run as soon as the machine is up and running. This is called a provisioning the machine. Provisioning is one of the DevOps terms that are used by DevOps engineers. So you can, for example, choose to run a shell script that will install Apache, for example, when the machine gets started. You can also use, as we said, any of the configuration managers or provisioners such as Puppet, Chef, Ansible, Salt, and Docker. Okay, so you feel free to change this file however you want. Once done, save the file, and the next step is issuing Vagrant up. And in the issue Vagrant up, Vagrant will do one of two things. It will search for the box, and the box here refers to the template by which Vagrant pulls the image from and starts deploying it on your machine as a virtual machine or as a Vagrant machine. If it finds this box on your system, it is going to use it. If you haven't installed this box yet, or if you haven't downloaded this box yet, it is going to go and fetch that box from its default website, which is atlas.hashicorp.com. And once the box is done downloading, it's going to use it for this installation as well as subsequent installations. So when I click enter on Vagrant up, and because I have already downloaded this box before starting this lab, you're going to see that it's going to import the base box from my file system, from my local machine, instead of having to go and download it from an external website. And this, of course, will save a lot of time. So let's wait till the machine's up and running. Notice here that Vagrant is forwarding ports. The port that we have already configured, 8080, is being forwarded to port 8080. And actually this machine is also pre-configured with some other software. It comes pre-installed with Apache and also the MySQL database server. We don't need those, we just need the Tomcat installation. And now it's up and running. In order to access this machine, all what you have to do is just issue Vagrant SSH like this, and you are in. This is the machine. This machine already has Tomcat installed. If you want to make sure, let's just clear the screen, and we can run systemctl status Tomcat. And as you can see here, Tomcat is active and running. This means that if I go to my browser like this, let's use one of those windows that we have already, and localhost 8080. If I click enter, as you can see here, I have an installation of Tomcat. It is Tomcat 9, and as we have said, the least version of Tomcat that will run Jenkins is 7, so we have version 9. It's already above the minimum requirements. So now we are ready to install Jenkins on our Tomcat server. And that is going to be the starting topic of our next lecture. So until then, see you next. Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a new lecture in your course, Beginning Jenkins. My name is Ahmed, I work for Eduonix, and this is section 2 of our class. In this lecture, we are going to start installing Jenkins through one of the methods that we have explained, which is to be part of an Apache Tomcat web server, or an application server if you wish to call it. We are going to install Jenkins as a WAR file. If you are not familiar with a WAR file, it is short for Web Archive, WAR, and it contains a number of Java jar files. A jar file is, again, a group of Java files that construct an application in its own. So a WAR file is a group of jar files, and a jar file is a group of Java files, and all those in themselves construct an application on its own. So the first step of this installation is to download actually the WAR file. Let's have a look first at the different installation options for Jenkins. Let's go to Google and search for download Jenkins to go straight to the page where we can download it. Okay, let's have a look here. We have two methods or two versions. We have long-term support or LTS, and we have the weekly. The difference between both, as you can see here, a weekly, where a new release is produced weekly to deliver bug fixes and features to users and plugin developers. This is the sometimes called cutting-edge versions. Well, this is long-term support. This is the more stable, if you wish to call it, and it has longer support periods. I'm going to choose this one, long-term support, and I'm going to go to generic Java package, and I'm going to copy this link. Okay, and I'm gonna go to my Vagrant machine here, and I'm gonna use the wget wget is a command in Linux that is used to download files of the internet. That is exactly what we need to do. We're going to download the WAR file from the Jenkins webpage, and once it is done, we're going to start deploying it. So see you when the file gets downloaded. Once the download is finished, I have two options. Either to install Jenkins as a servlet on a Tomcat and to enable Tomcat to have other servlets or to have other applications installed alongside Jenkins. In this case, and in order to demonstrate what I mean, I'm copy Jenkins.war to the default installation of Tomcat. In our case, it's at /opt. Of course, if you've installed Tomcat on your own, you will have to have noted where it has been installed. In our case, it's by default installed in /opt/tomcat, and inside the installation directory you will have a subdirectory that is called web apps. Just copy Jenkins.war inside that web apps directory. Once done, let's have a look at our browser, and let's return back to Tomcat. The same page, just add a /Jenkins like this. In a few moments, just the application is starting. Please wait while Jenkins is getting ready to work. The browser will automatically refresh when it is finished. Okay, and now it is going to ask you for a password. The password is automatically generated with any new Jenkins installation, and this password, of course, is for securing Jenkins, because if a default password was given, this default password may be a very risky security vulnerability, because anybody could exploit a default installation Jenkins where the administrator forgot to set the default password. So the hacker can easily get this default password from the internet or from Jenkins website and use it to access the Jenkins server. So for these reasons, Jenkins automatically creates a random, very strong password, and it saves it in this file by default. It's giving you the path for the file. All that you have to do is just cat this file, and as you can see here, this is the password that we need. As you can see here, it's very, very strong password. Just copy the text as it is, this alphanumeric string, go back to the Jenkins page and paste it, and click on continue. Once done, Jenkins is going to start communicating with the server over the internet, because by default, if you want to install plugins, Jenkins has a large set of plugins that you can use, but we're going to get to that later. So I am going to close this window. Now Jenkins is ready to start using Jenkins. Okay, and this is the default page of Jenkins. Congratulations, you have installed Jenkins, but as part of Tomcat, this means that you can have other applications installed. Like, say, for example, I can have a internet banking, like for example, iBanking application. I can have a calculator, for example. Any other application can be hosted inside this Tomcat, because this is not the default application. This is not the default Tomcat application. This is just an application within Tomcat. Tomcat can host other applications beside this one. Some other people may refer to install Jenkins as the only application on Tomcat. So this way, Tomcat is going to be dedicated for Jenkins. If you want to do this, it's pretty easy. All what you have to do is just remove everything that is under /opt/tomcat/web apps. Just make sure that you delete everything under web apps. If you forgot to add this / with the asterisk, you're going to delete the web apps directory itself. You don't want to do this. You want to delete everything that is behind this or under this directory. Let's do that, and then we are going to copy our Jenkins.war. This time we are going to change its name from Jenkins.war as it was to root.war. This way it is going to, let's have a look at the contents of the directory now. I'm sorry, it should be under web apps. Sorry, my fault. Root.war, and let's delete that file. It's not of importance. Okay, and now let's have a look at the contents of web apps now. You're gonna see that it does have a directory that is called root, although I have deleted everything under this directory and just copied root.war or Jenkins.war, just renamed it to root.war. But once it But once any WAR file arrives at this special directory in Tomcat, it gets deployed automatically. In our case, it got deployed to root, and root refers to the default application in Tomcat. Now, if we get back to our web browser, and now I will have to delete this Jenkins from my URL and just head to localhost 8080 as if I am heading to the default Tomcat page, only to find that this time I do not have the default page of Tomcat. I have the default page or the default login page of Jenkins. So let's log in, and to log in I'm going to use the same password that Jenkins has provided for me. Of course, you will have to, or you can change this password if you want to. Of course, if you want to leave it like that, it's up to you. Let's log in, and again you are inside Jenkins default page. However, this time you are at localhost 8080. This is the default page of Tomcat. Tomcat now is dedicated for this application for Jenkins. And that brings us to the end of this lecture. In the coming lecture, we are going to see how we can install Jenkins as a standalone service. We are not going to use Tomcat for our installation. We're not going to even use any application server, whether it was WebSphere, WebLogic, Tomcat, JBoss, or any other application server. We are going to use the other way of installing Jenkins, which is to install it using a ready-made package, one of those. So until next lecture, see you next. Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Ahmed for Eduonix, and this is beginning Jenkins. And in this section we are discussing different ways of installing Jenkins. As we have mentioned in the first lecture of this section, Jenkins is a very flexible application when it comes to installation, and also, as you're going to see, when it comes to its usage and the ways you can customize it for your specific needs and for your specific environment. However, we are now discussing the installation. In the previous lecture, we have seen how we can install Jenkins as a servlet inside Tomcat by using the generic Java package .war option. Let's see in this lecture how we can use one of those precompiled files, binary files, as it's sometimes called. As you can see here, Jenkins is very generous in its options. You can install it as a Docker container. We can install it inside Docker, inside FreeBSD, Mac, Windows, Ubuntu, Red Hat, Variants, even SUSE. All major Linux distributions have a ready-made or precompiled binary file to install Jenkins. In our case, on our specific case, we're going to use Ubuntu Debian because I think it's easier to use and it is very common and it has a large support base. So let's go to our machine again and let's exit from our Tomcat Vagrant machine, and that is because this machine has Tomcat already installed, and we want to demonstrate how we can install Jenkins as a standalone application. So instead of removing Tomcat from this machine, we are going to create a new machine, a new Ubuntu machine, but this time a different one that does not have anything pre-installed. This machine has, as we have mentioned in the previous lecture, it has Tomcat, Apache, and MySQL already installed. So let's hold this machine. And Vagrant hold, as you can see here, is just going to suspend or to shut down the machine. As you can see, it's very easy to shut down the machine from outside. And it's also very easy to create a new machine, as we're going to see in a moment. So we are now inside Tomcat. Let's go one directory up and create a new directory. Let's call it Ubuntu. Okay, seems like we have already an Ubuntu. Let's ensure that it does not have any Vagrant file. No, it does not have. So let's Vagrant init. This time I'm going to use a box that is called Ubuntu/Ubuntu-16.10, which is the latest version of Ubuntu at the time of this recording. And again, let's ensure that port 8080 is being forwarded. Let's use a different port for this case just to show you that this is a different installation. So let's use, instead of 8080, we're going to use 8888. So whenever anybody accesses port 8888 on localhost, the traffic will be automatically forwarded to port 8080 on the guest, which of course is going to be handled by Jenkins. Okay, once done, let's run Vagrant up. And again, if you have this box already installed or already downloaded on your machine, it is going just to import or deploy a Vagrant machine out of it. If you don't have this box installed already on your system, it's going to download it from the internet. Once it is downloaded, it's not going to be downloaded again, just one time, and it's going to be saved on your file system for subsequent uses. In my case, I have already downloaded this box because I use it in many of my labs. And now it's forwarding the ports, setting up the machine, Okay, and now the machine has been started correctly, successfully. Let's clear the screen and let's Vagrant SSH inside that machine. Okay, and I'm inside. As you can see here, I do not have any Tomcat or Apache. As you can see here, I have nothing installed in this machine, just a plain old native Ubuntu installation. We are going to use it to install the Debian package of Jenkins. And again, I have more than one option. I can go to Jenkins and download the binary Debian package. As you can see here, if I click on this link, as you can see here, I am presented with a large number of Debian packages for different versions of Jenkins, latest of which, of course, is 2.7.4. I can download this Debian file on my machine, and I can use a command like dpackage to install this Debian package. I can also use the apt-get command to install Jenkins, and using apt-get is highly recommended if you are using Ubuntu, the same way as yum is recommended if you are using a Red Hat based machine. That is because those are called package managers. A package manager can handle dependencies, can handle download, can resume broken downloads, it can do lots of things that instead of doing it yourself, instead of doing it manually. So let's just use the commands that Jenkins has generously provided for us on the help page. I'm going to first import the key to use to add a repository to my list of repositories of the Ubuntu. So this command is going to just download and import the key using apt-get add. Next thing is I need to add this line to /etc/apt/sources.list. This is to enable apt-get to look at this repository for the packages that install Jenkins. So I need to be a root for doing this, so I'm going to use sudo, then vim. Vim is my favorite text editor, but of course you can use whatever editor you need. However, whatever editor you choose, like Nano for example. So it's /etc/apt/sources.list, and go to the end of the file and add this line. Save. Then all what you have to do is do sudo apt-get update in order to update the different repositories, including the one that we have already added, which is the Jenkins source. It's going to take just a few seconds to complete. Once done, I can just add, of course, sudo apt-get install Jenkins, and apt-get is going to do the rest for me. It's going to download all the prerequisites that are needed by Jenkins, including Java, because Java is not installed in this machine by default. Again, this is just a plain Ubuntu installation with nothing pre-installed, with nothing shipped. So it is going to download and install the prerequisites that are needed to run Jenkins, and of course the Jenkins package itself. So I'm gonna pause the video for a few moments till this installation is complete and return back to you. Okay, and the download is finished, and it is actually installing Jenkins on your machine, or our machine in this case. And now everything is done. Just wait for a few seconds till it just give me the prompt again, and okay. And guess what? That is the only thing that you need to do to install Jenkins using a pre-compiled binary file. All what you need to do now is just use sudo systemcdl start Jenkins. Same way you start anything on Ubuntu. Same way you start Apache or any other service on the system. So once it is done, I can just use a command like lsof-i:88 just to ensure that Java has already been started, or the server is started. Now I can go again to the browser, and I can go to Jenkins, the previous installation. Of course, now this will no longer work because I have shut down the machine and I have forwarded the port to a different port, which is 8888. Okay, again, this is the default installation of Jenkins, and again it is asking you for an admin password. However, if you notice, this path is different from the previous path. The previous path, if you remember, have been in the home directory of the current user, which was /home/Ubuntu. But because this has been installed using apt-get, it is installing the Jenkins files inside /var/lib/Jenkins. We're gonna go through that later in this class. All what we have to do now is, again, take the admin password. That is, of course, you need to be sudo, because this time you are reading one of the system files, so you need to be root in order to do this. I'm gonna copy this string. I paste it here. Just make sure that you take the whole string without any extra spaces or new lines at the end. And again, it's prompting you to install plugins. Let's just skip this for the moment and start using Jenkins. And once more again, you have the default admin page of Jenkins, and you are prompted to create a new job, which is the first thing you might want to do when you start Jenkins. And that brings us to the end of this lecture. In the coming lecture, we're going to start by discussing one of the even more easier features of installing Jenkins, or more technically, running Jenkins, and that is by using the WAR file by itself, without any containers, without any installation, just running the file. That is going to be the starting topic of next lecture, so until then, see you next. Hello everyone, welcome back. This is a new lecture in your course, Beginning Jenkins by Eduonix. My name is Ahmed, and in this section of the class, we are discussing different ways to install Jenkins. We have already seen how we can install Jenkins as part of a container like Tomcat. We have also seen how we can install it as a standalone application using a precompiled binary file, and we had Ubuntu as an example system for this installation, although Jenkins can be installed also on Windows, Mac OS X, Fedora, Red Hat, and other Linux and Unix flavors. Finally, we have seen how we can run Jenkins just as it is from the WAR file by using the java-jar command and just passing in the WAR file that have been downloaded from Jenkins. Let's just press Ctrl+C to get out of this running daemon, and now if you refresh this page, you will immediately see that the port has been closed. This is because, as we said, we've been running Jenkins out of the WAR file. Once we press Ctrl+C, we are out of the daemon, we are out of the service, and Jenkins is down. Okay. Now, let's see the final method of installing Jenkins on the machine, which is running it through a Docker container. Some of you may not be familiar with Docker, some of you may be familiar with Docker. Let's have a quick discussion about what Docker is. Docker is one of the DevOps tools that creates isolated software environment, and this environment is more technically known as a container. This container can coexist on the same machine with other containers. Each container may contain the very same software, but it's running in its own isolated environment with its own port. That way, you can just package your application inside a Docker container, give it to the client or to whatever environment you want, perhaps for testing or something, and they can do all sorts of tests on your container with the same configuration that you had on your machine. Docker has a famous statement that says that Docker solves the problem of it has been running on my machine. This is a very well-known problem that has been around long ago. Of course, before the virtualization platforms and the virtualization technologies have evolved, developers used to code their applications on their old laptops, and then they give the client or the testers or whatever environment that they need to deploy the application on this, just give it the binary files or the text files or the HTML files or the Java files, whatever files the application contained, and once the operator or the personnel who is entitled to install this software puts the configuration files in place and starts the application, it may fail. Then the developer, all what he has is that this application has been running on my machine and I have changed nothing. Just check your machine or check your environment. So Docker has solved this problem by packaging all the environment, all the prerequisites that the application needs to run, including the kernel modules, including any operating system prerequisites inside the container. And once done, this container can be installed or can be deployed on any machine or any environment that is running Docker. And the software is running the same way exactly it has been running on the developer machine or on the machine where it was coded or where it was packaged. So that is a brief introduction about Docker. Docker does have a container specifically for Jenkins. Jenkins is packaged inside a container. To see the advantages of using Docker, let's have a look at its webpage, docker.com. And as you can see here, if you want to get Docker, you can install it on a Mac, on a Windows, on a cloud provider like AWS, Azure, CentOS, Debian, Fedora, Oracle Linux, Ubuntu, and lots of platforms does support Docker. If you have an application that runs only on Ubuntu, Linux, for example, or Debian, you can run it on a Red Hat, you can run it on a Mac, you can run it on a Windows using Docker very easily by just putting it inside a container. So, although Jenkins by itself is also supported by most or all of those platforms, if your organization does have Docker installed, you can use it to install Jenkins as a container. And this will save you from the installation steps and configuration. You'll not have to install it inside a container. You're not going to even have to install it using apt-get or yum. You're just going to run it inside a container, and this container can be destroyed at any time, as we are going to see in a moment. So the first step we need to do is to actually install Docker. Let's clear the screen. And in order to install Docker, you will have to run some commands. Those commands were taken from the docker.io or docker.com website. First thing is to install those prerequisites. These are just some packages that need to be installed. They are all mentioned in the PDF file that accompanies this lecture. Just install the prerequisites. Once done, you will have to install the JPG key that will be used to install or to add the repository that is used to install Docker. Just as we added the repository for Jenkins, Docker has its own repository. Once done, you will have to verify the fingerprint, which is a security measure, by running this command. And then now you can add the repository that is used to install Docker by running this command. Gonna add this repository to your sources. If you have a look now at /etc/apt/sources.list and go to the end, you're gonna find that you now have a Docker installation repository added to the end. Okay, so now all what you need to do is just run sudo apt-get update in order to update the sources and include the new sources that we have just added, the source for Docker. Once done, you will have just to sudo apt-get install docker -ce, and CE here is short for Community Edition. Because Docker now has a Community Edition, it also has an Enterprise Edition. The Community Edition is free to use. After all, Docker is an open source product, so the Community Edition is free to use, but it has no support from the company. If you need support, it's gonna be through the community, through other people like you using the product, and they may solve the problem that you face if they have faced a similar problem. However, if you want to install Docker for an enterprise that needs paid support, you can opt for purchasing the license for Docker EE or Enterprise Edition. Just leave it for a few moments to complete. Okay, once done, you can verify that Docker has been installed by running docker version. Okay, let's run sudo docker version because most of the Docker commands needs to run using sudo. So you have now the client and the server versions. Now you can use Docker to pull an image that contains Jenkins. So it's sudo docker pull Jenkins. Just like that. It's as easy as that. It is going to download all the prerequisites, not just the prerequisites for installing software, but also any kernel files, any libraries, anything that was used to run this software is going to be downloaded, including the file system, including the configuration files. Anything that is needed by Jenkins to run is going to be downloaded and placed in its isolated file system. All this is going to be inside the container, as we are going to see in a few moments. I'm going to pause the video for a few moments till this download is complete, and I'm going to return back to you. Okay, now it is extracting the images that it has downloaded, or the file systems that it has downloaded, together with, as we said, any libraries or any prerequisites that the application needs to run regardless of the underlying OS. It will just run inside the container, completely isolated from anything else. Okay, now you have Jenkins installed. You need to run the container. You can run several containers, as we're going to see, inside the same machine. So if you have a look first at, I want to show you the contents of the current directory, which is /home/vagrant. As you can see, it is empty. This is /home/vagrant, which is the home directory of the user, of the current user. So in order to run the container, you're going to run a command as follows: docker run -d -p, and -p here is for forwarding the ports. So I'm going to forward port 8080, which is the default port of Jenkins, to 8080 to be the same port on the host or the same port on the local machine. /home, and /v here is for volume. This is for mapping volumes or file systems from inside the Docker container to the host machine. This is like a shared directory between the container and the machine. So /home/vagrant will be the local directory. It's going to be mapped to /var/Jenkins_home, which is the file system or the directory that contains Jenkins files inside the Jenkins container, and then -t for the tag, and it's Jenkins. Okay, I need to run this command as sudo. Forgot to add sudo at the start. Okay, and once done, you will have this long string of characters and numbers, which indicates the unique identifier for this Docker container. The only thing that we need to ensure now is that this container is running Jenkins. So if you want to make sure, all what you have to do is just head to your browser. And I guess we do have here, okay, let's open again a local host. This time it's 8080. And notice here what I'm doing. I am forwarding the port 8080 from the container to the Vagrant machine with the same port 8080, and then I'm forwarding the same port 8080 from the Vagrant machine to the host. So 8080 is going to be passed from the host to the Vagrant machine to the container without any changes. But if I want to, I can change this port to whatever I need. This is just for simplicity and so as not to complicate things, because now we have two levels of abstraction or of virtualization, if you wish to call it. Anyway, let's press enter. Okay, it seems that the port is not running, so let's quickly run sudo lslf. And okay, we have docker pr, it's running. So maybe we have a problem with the Vagrant file. So let's have a look quickly at the Vagrant file. Okay, we have forwarded port 8080 to port 8888 and not 8080. That is the problem. So let's change this port to be 8888. I just forgot. And again, we have unlock Jenkins, the default page of Jenkins. The only thing that is different is that this is now running inside a Docker container. So we need to have a look at this key. So go Vagrant SSH and notice here the contents of /home/vagrant. Now we are inside the machine, and again we are inside /home/vagrant. This is the file, or this is the directory which was mapped to /var/Jenkins_home. If we ls this directory, now you're gonna see that it is filled with files that were not there. If you remember, when we ls on this file before we mapped before we ran the Docker container, it was empty. But now it has those files. Those are the Jenkins files. All what we have to do is go to secrets and cat the file that is called initial admin password. And you have here the password. You have to have a copy of this password again. Sorry, I didn't take it. Let's have a full copy of this password. Paste it here without any extra characters and click continue. Again, it is going to prompt you for installing plugins. Let's skip this part. And again, Jenkins is ready. Start using Jenkins. Okay, so by now we have more than one way to install Jenkins, either as a standalone application or as a WAR file, or a standalone WAR file, or as a WAR file inside a Java application server like Tomcat, and also as a Docker container. All these are different methods of installing Jenkins. You might ask yourself, what is the best method? Which method should I choose? Actually, that is an incorrect question. Why? Because all the previous methods are as good as their intended environments and needs. For example, if your organization does already have a WebSphere server that is powerful enough, that has enough RAM, that has enough CPU processing power to host dozens of applications, it might not be the best idea to invest in a new application server just for Jenkins. On the other hand, if your environment is so small that you don't need the bells and whistles of a complete application server, you can opt for the standalone Jenkins installation. Just grab the binary file and install it. Maybe you just want to try a feature or two of the product and shut it down. You don't want to go through an installation, then an uninstallation. Perhaps running the generic jar file may be a good option here. And finally, if your organization does have Docker, especially if you own the enterprise version or the enterprise edition of Docker and you have a paid support service, then your best investment here would be to install Jenkins as a container inside Docker, as we have just seen. And that brings us to the end of this lecture and to the end of this section. In the coming section, we will have an already installed Jenkins server. We are going to start exploring the different features and configuration options of it. So until then, it's goodbye.